The victory celebration echoed across 17 star systems as news of Earth's surrender spread through quantum relay networks. In the crystalline towers of Nexus Prime, Zephyrian commanders raised their ceremonial chalices filled with fermented starfruit wine. The 3-year siege had finally ended. Humanity, the stubborn species that had dared to reject the Empire's generous offer of vassalage, now knelt in defeat. Admiral Kethran stood on the observation deck of the Dominion's crown, watching Earth's blue marble rotate slowly beneath his flagship. Smoke still rose from the major population centers where the final bombardments had broken the last pockets of resistance. The planet's surrender had been unconditional. No terms, no negotiations, just a simple transmission that had arrived 6 hours ago. We yield. Such a waste, muttered Captain Velnara, her reptilian features twisted in what might have been disgust. 3 years of bloodshed for this insignificant world. Kethran's 4 eyes remained fixed on the planet below. Insignificant? This species held back the might of the Zephyrian Empire for 3 years. They destroyed 12 of our battleships and cost us nearly 1 million soldiers. I would hardly call that insignificant. The humans had fought with a ferocity that had surprised even the Empire's most seasoned generals. Their ships were primitive, their weapons crude by galactic standards, but their tactics had been relentless. Wave after wave of suicide attacks, guerrilla raids on supply lines, and desperate last stands on barren moons had slowly worn down the Imperial forces. But in the end, numbers had prevailed. The Empire's industrial might had simply overwhelmed humanity's limited resources. Across the galaxy, other species breathed easier. The Corvani traders resumed their routes to the Outer Rim, no longer fearing human pirates. The peaceful Althurians emerged from their defensive shells, believing the threat of aggressive expansion had passed. Even the proud Zarathi, who had initially admired humanity's warrior spirit, now dismissed them as another conquered footnote in the Empire's endless chronicle of victory. On Earth itself, the occupation began with ruthless efficiency. Zephyrian administrators descended upon the major cities, cataloging resources and identifying key infrastructure. The planet's military installations were dismantled, their weapons confiscated or destroyed. Human leaders were rounded up and transported to re-education facilities on distant worlds. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. Compliance was mandatory. But in the deepest vaults of the Pentagon sub-basement, a single light continued to blink on an abandoned console. The Rift project status remained green, its countdown timer showing negative numbers, meaning the operation had already begun. The room had been sealed for months, its existence erased from all official records. Even the Zephyrians, with their thorough intelligence networks, had found no trace of it. Admiral Kethran received his new orders the following morning. The Empire's expansion would continue, but Earth would serve as a regional administrative center. The humans would be relocated to designated sectors, their population reduced to manageable levels. The planet's resources would feed the Empire's growing appetite for raw materials. It was a fate that had befallen dozens of species before them. The Admiral's aide, a young officer named Tirlos, approached with the daily intelligence reports. "Sir, our scouts have completed their survey of the outer system. All human installations have been identified and secured. However, there's something unusual in the reports from the Rift region." Kethran's attention sharpened. The Rift was a spatial anomaly located beyond Pluto's orbit, a region where space itself seemed to fold and twist in impossible ways. Long-range sensors couldn't penetrate its boundaries, and the few probe ships sent to investigate had never returned. Even the humans had seemed to avoid it, treating it as a navigational hazard rather than a strategic asset. "What kind of unusual?" Kethran asked. "The gravitational distortions are intensifying. Our science teams believe it might be natural instability, but the pattern seems almost deliberate, like something is being activated from within." The Admiral's talons drummed against his command chair. 3 years of war had taught him to be suspicious of anything involving humans that seemed too convenient. Their surrender had been surprisingly quick once their orbital defenses fell. No final speeches, no dramatic last stands. Just a simple message of surrender that had caught everyone off guard. "Double the sensor arrays monitoring the Rift," he ordered. "If anything emerges from that anomaly, I want to know about immediately." Tirlos nodded and turned to leave, but Kethran's voice stopped him. "And Tirlos? Run a deep scan of all human communication networks. Look for any references to the Rift, any projects or research that might have been conducted there. Something about this victory feels too easy." As the young officer hurried away, Kethran returned his gaze to Earth. The planet looked peaceful now, its cities quiet under Imperial occupation. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a warrior's instinct whispered that this was not the end. The humans had been too clever, too resourceful to simply give up. They had sacrificed everything to hold this one insignificant world for 3 years. The question was, what had they been protecting? The answer came 3 days later, but not in the way Admiral Kethran expected. Dr. Elena Vasquez crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath New Geneva, her fingers dancing across a quantum-encrypted tablet. The Zephyrian patrols had increased their sweeps of the underground networks, but they still didn't understand human architecture well enough to find every hidden passage. Above her, the sound of occupation continued. Alien voices barking orders, heavy footsteps of armored soldiers, the occasional scream of someone being dragged away for questioning. The message on her screen was brief but electrifying. "Prometheus fleet operational. Countdown at T-minus 72 hours. May God have mercy on all our souls." Elena closed her eyes and felt the weight of 3 years of deception settling on her shoulders. She had been part of the Rift Project since its inception, one of the few humans who knew the truth about humanity's greatest secret. While the Empire's forces had battered Earth's defenses, while millions had died in the orbital battles, the real war effort had been happening in a dimension folded just outside normal space. The Rift hadn't been a natural phenomenon. It was humanity's most ambitious engineering project, a crack in reality itself that led to a pocket dimension where Earth's true fleet had been under construction. While the Empire counted ships and measured humanity's diminishing resources, they had no idea that thousands of vessels were being built in a space that didn't technically exist. Elena's tablet chimed softly. A new message from Admiral Sarah Chun, the woman who had been officially declared dead 2 years ago. "All cell leaders, prepare for Phase 2. Target identification protocols are active. Remember, we are not just fighting for Earth. We are fighting for the future of every species that values freedom." The plan had been elegant in its brutality. Earth's surrender had been calculated, timed precisely to coincide with the Prometheus fleet's completion. The Empire's forces were now concentrated in the Sol system, their guard lowered by victory. Their celebration would be their downfall. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Commander Zektar of the Corvani Trade Federation was experiencing his own revelation. His merchant vessel, the Prophet's Edge, had been monitoring subspace communications as part of a routine intelligence-gathering operation. The Corvani had learned long ago that information was more valuable than any cargo, and they maintained an extensive network of listening posts throughout the galaxy. What Zektar had discovered made his blood run cold. The transmission had been brief, barely detectable, and encrypted with a cipher that had taken his best cryptographers 6 hours to break. It was a fragment of a larger message, but the content was unmistakable. Titan-class dreadnoughts operational. Void touch weaponry armed and ready. Phase 2 authorization confirmed. Show them what humanity truly is. Zektar's 4 hands trembled as he reached for the emergency communication array. The Corvani had survived for millennia by knowing when to run, when to fight, and when to choose sides. This message suggested that humanity's defeat had been an elaborate deception, but the implications were staggering. How could a species that had just been conquered possess Titan-class vessels? The largest human ships encountered during the war had been barely cruiser-sized. His transmission to the Zephyrian command was flagged as Priority 1 intelligence. Within minutes, Admiral Kethran himself was on the secure channel, his image flickering with quantum interference. "Explain," the Admiral commanded, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Admiral, we've intercepted communications suggesting the humans may have concealed military assets of significant scale. The encryption patterns match no known human technology, but the content references weapon systems that shouldn't exist." Kethran's 4 eyes narrowed. "Shouldn't exist, or we haven't encountered them?" "The latter, sir." The message fragment mentioned void-touch weaponry and Titan-class dreadnoughts. Our intelligence networks have no record of humanity possessing such technology. The Admiral's silence stretched for long seconds. Finally, he spoke. How long until we can decrypt the complete message? Unknown, sir. But Admiral, there's something else. The transmission originated from the Rift region. Kethran's blood turned to ice. He had been monitoring the anomaly for 3 days, and the gravitational distortions had been growing stronger. His science teams had attributed it to natural instability, but now he wondered if something else was stirring in that twisted space. Alert all fleet commanders, he ordered. I want every available ship moved to defensive positions around Earth. If the humans have been hiding something in the rift, we need to be ready. But preparation time was running out faster than anyone realized. In the pocket dimension beyond the rift, Admiral Chin stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, humanity's first planet killer. The vessel was 20 kilometers long, its hull incorporating technology that had been developed in absolute secrecy. Around her, the rest of the hidden fleet stretched into the distance. Not the few hundred ships the Empire believed humanity possessed, but over 10,000 vessels of war, each one designed with a single purpose: to make the galaxy remember why humanity had fought so hard for one small blue planet. Ma'am, her tactical officer reported, all fleet elements report ready. The rift generators are stable. We can begin emergence procedures on your command. Chin nodded, her expression carved from stone. 3 years of watching her species die, while she built weapons in the darkness, had changed her. The woman who had once advocated for a peaceful coexistence was gone, replaced by someone who understood that survival sometimes required becoming the monster your enemies feared most. Signal all ships, she said quietly. Operation Prometheus is authorized. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity becomes when you take everything from us. The rift began to tear open, reality screaming as 10,000 ships prepared to cross into normal space. The first indication of catastrophe came from the sensor arrays monitoring the rift. Lieutenant Tirlos watched in horror as his displays erupted in cascading warnings. The gravitational distortions weren't random. They were synchronized, controlled, following patterns that suggested massive artificial structures moving through folded space. Admiral, he called across the bridge of the Dominion's crown. The rift is destabilizing. Multiple massive objects are approaching the threshold. Admiral Kethran abandoned his planning session and strode to the sensor station. What he saw there defied his understanding of human capabilities. The energy readings were off the charts, suggesting vessels of unprecedented size moving through dimensions that shouldn't exist. How many? He demanded. Impossible to determine, sir. The quantum interference is too severe. But, Admiral, these aren't the same energy signatures we've seen from human vessels. These are bigger, much bigger. The first ship emerged from the rift like a nightmare-given form. The Prometheus tore through the barrier between dimensions, its hull gleaming with an unnatural darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. 20 kilometers of death and destruction materialized in the space beyond Pluto's orbit, followed by another vessel of similar size, then another. Kethran's composure cracked. Give me fleet command. Now. But even as he spoke, the scope of humanity's deception became clear. Ships continued to emerge from the rift, not dozens, but hundreds, then thousands. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and massive dreadnoughts unlike anything in the galactic databases. The humans hadn't just been hiding a few vessels. They had built an entire parallel fleet in a space that officially didn't exist. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Chin watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Zephyrian fleet was scattering, their ships attempting to form defensive lines around Earth. They had been caught completely off guard, their forces distributed across the system in occupation formations rather than battle readiness. Target selection complete, reported Commander Hayes, her tactical officer. Primary targets are the Dominion's crown and the occupation fleet. Secondary targets are the logistics bases on Mars and Europa. Chin nodded. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The Zephyrians had concentrated their forces in the Sol system, believing they were securing a conquered territory. Instead, they had trapped themselves in a kill zone. All ships, This is Admiral Chun. You know what they did to our world. You know what they did to our people. Today, we show them the price of underestimating humanity. Fire at will. The Prometheus fleet opened fire with weapons that had been developed in the deepest secrecy. Void touch cannons, devices that could tear holes in space itself, lanced out toward the Zephyrian positions. The first salvo caught the occupation fleet completely unprepared. 3 battleships simply ceased to exist, their matter scattered across several dimensions. Admiral Kethran watched his fleet die with the detached horror of a warrior who had walked into a trap. His ships were powerful, their weapons formidable by galactic standards, but they were facing technology that shouldn't exist. The human vessels moved with impossible grace, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that deflected his fleet's return fire. All vessels, emergency jump to Rally Point 7, he ordered. We need to regroup and warn the Empire. But the humans had anticipated this. As the Zephyrian ships began to charge their jump drives, they found their escape routes blocked by reality itself. The Prometheus fleet had surrounded them with spatial distortions, creating a bubble of twisted space that prevented faster-than-light travel. "Sir," Tirlos reported, his voice tight with panic. "Jump drives are non-functional. The humans are using some kind of dimensional anchor. We're trapped." Kethran closed his eyes and felt the weight of his miscalculation. The humans hadn't surrendered. They had lured the Empire into a killing field. The 3-year siege hadn't been about defending Earth. It had been about buying time to complete their true war machine. On Earth's surface, the Zephyrian occupation forces received their first hint of the disaster unfolding in space. The orbital bombardment platforms that had been maintaining order suddenly went silent. Communication arrays stopped responding. The sky itself seemed to flicker with unnatural energy. Dr. Elena Vasquez emerged from the tunnels beneath New Geneva, her tablet displaying real-time updates from the Prometheus fleet. Around her, other resistance members were surfacing from their hiding places, their faces lit with savage joy. The waiting was over. Phase 3 is authorized, she announced at her cell. All sleeping agents are to activate. Show our guests what human hospitality really means. Across the planet, the Zephyrian occupation began to unravel. Supply convoys found their routes blocked by humans who had supposedly been pacified. Command centers discovered that their local guides had been feeding them false information for months. The defeated population suddenly revealed weapons caches that shouldn't exist, knowledge they shouldn't possess, and a coordination that suggested they had never truly surrendered. In space, the slaughter continued. The Prometheus fleet moved through the trapped Zephyrian forces like death itself, their void-touch weapons reducing proud warships to quantum foam. Admiral Kethran's flagship, the Dominion's Crown, held position at the center of the dying fleet, its shields flickering under the assault. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human command ship. They're offering to speak with you." Kethran straightened his uniform and activated the channel. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his screen, her expression cold and implacable. "Admiral Kethran," she said, "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation. I believe you have something that belongs to us." "What do you want?" Kethran asked, though he already knew the answer. "Our planet, our people, and justice for the 3 years of hell you put us through." Chen's voice was steady, but her eyes burned with controlled fury. "You thought you had conquered humanity. You were wrong. You had only encountered our forward guard." The transmission ended, and Kethran realized that the galaxy celebration had been premature. Humanity hadn't been defeated. They had been preparing for this moment. The question now was whether anyone would survive to warn the Empire of what they had awakened. The news of the Sol System's fall reached the Zephyrian High Command 18 hours after the Prometheus fleet's emergence. The quantum relay carrying Admiral Kethran's final transmission had been damaged, delivering only fragments of the catastrophic report. Emergency sessions were called across the Empire's 17 core worlds as military leaders struggled to comprehend the impossible. Supreme Admiral HFY Cicera stood before the War Council in the crystalline chambers of the Imperial Citadel, her ceremonial armor reflecting the holographic displays that showed their rapidly deteriorating situation. The council members, Representatives from dozens of conquered species who had bought their survival through service to the Empire watched in stunned silence as the scope of humanity's deception became clear. "The Sol system is lost," Tiaklazera announced, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 defeated fleets. "Our occupation forces have been eliminated. The humans have revealed military capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates by several orders of magnitude." Counselor Vextai, a skeletal Zarathi whose species had once ruled 3 star systems before their own conquest, leaned forward. "How is this possible?" "Our scouts reported complete human fleet destruction during the siege." "Because they showed us exactly what they wanted us to see," Tiaklazera replied, her 4 eyes scanning the assembled faces. "The human fleet we destroyed was real, but it was a decoy. While we focused on their visible forces, they were constructing a parallel armada in folded space, a dimension we didn't know existed." The implication sent shockwaves through the Council. If humanity could hide entire fleets in pocket dimensions, what else might they be concealing? How many other species had similar capabilities that the Empire had never discovered? Meanwhile, the Prometheus fleet had begun its expansion beyond the Sol system. Admiral Chin stood on her flagship's bridge, watching as her forces divided into strike groups. The plan was methodical. Hit the Empire's forward bases, destroy their supply lines, and force them to defend assets they had thought were secure. "Admiral," Commander Hayes reported, "the advanced scouts have identified 17 priority targets within jump range. Primary military installations, logistics hubs, and communication relays." Chin nodded. The humans had spent 3 years studying Zephyrian tactics, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses while pretending to be defeated. Now that knowledge would be weaponized. "Deploy the Shadow Squadrons to targets 1 through 12. The main fleet will hit the Kepler Station complex. It's time to show the galaxy that humanity's war is just beginning." The first indication that the conflict is spread beyond Sol came from the Outer Rim territories. The Corvani Trade Federation's monitoring stations detected massive spatial distortions near the Proxima Centauri system, followed by the complete disappearance of the Zephyrian garrison there. Similar reports flooded in from across the frontier. Human ships appearing without warning, striking with impossible weapons, then vanishing back into folded space. But the most devastating attack came at the Kepler Station complex, a massive military installation that served as the Empire's primary staging area for Outer Rim operations. The base commander, General Corvex, had just finished reviewing intelligence reports about the Sol system when reality itself seemed to tear open above his command center. The Prometheus emerged from a dimensional rift directly above the station, its void-touch cannons already charging. Around it, 100 smaller vessels materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with that same light-absorbing darkness that had become humanity's signature. "All defensive batteries. Open fire," Corvex ordered, but his words were lost in the chaos as the human fleet unleashed hell. The void-touch weapons didn't just destroy their targets. They erased them from existence. Entire sections of the station simply ceased to be, their matter scattered across multiple dimensions. The Zephyrian defenders found their energy shields useless against weapons that attacked the fundamental structure of space itself. In less than 30 minutes, the Kepler Station complex was gone, a facility that had taken 50 years to build, defended by the Empire's most advanced technology, had been reduced to quantum foam by weapons that shouldn't exist. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Across the Empire, species that had submitted to Zephyrian rule began to whisper about the return of humanity. Some spoke with fear, others with hope. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned defeat into victory through sheer audacity and technological superiority. On the Althurian homeworld, peaceful philosophers who had spent centuries under imperial protection began to question their assumptions. Elder Morthala, whose species had welcomed the Empire's order, watched the news reports with growing unease. "Perhaps," she murmured to her inner circle, "we have been too quick to assume that resistance is futile. The humans have shown us something we have forgotten, that defeat is only permanent if you accept it as such." Similar discussions were happening across the galaxy. The Zarathi warrior clans, who had admired humanity's fighting spirit during the siege, began to speak of honor and the possibility of redemption. The Valerian collective, whose hive mind had been subjugated through neural implants, started experiencing what their queens described as resonance patterns of hope. But it was a reaction of the Empire's slave soldiers that truly terrified the High Command. These were conquered peoples who had been forced to serve in the Zephyrian military, their loyalty ensured through a combination of threats and mind control technology. Now, for the first time in decades, they were seeing their masters shown to be vulnerable. Desertion rates spiked across the Imperial fleets. Sabotage incidents increased dramatically. Most disturbing of all, several garrison commanders reported that their slave troops were asking questions about humanity's dimensional technology, wondering if other species might be capable of similar feats. Supreme Admiral HFY Cicera faced the grim reality that her empire was beginning to fracture. The humans hadn't just revealed superior technology. They had shattered the myth of Zephyrian invincibility that held their multi-species dominion together. Deploy the extinction protocols, she ordered her staff. If humanity wants to play with forces beyond their understanding, we'll show them why the Empire has endured for 3,000 years. The extinction protocols were the Empire's ultimate weapon, planet-killing devices that could trigger stellar collapse, turning entire star systems into weapons of mass destruction. They had been used only 3 times in Imperial history, always against species that had proven too dangerous to conquer. But as the orders went out to activate these terrible weapons, Admiral Chun was already 3 moves ahead. The Prometheus fleet had been designed for exactly this scenario, and humanity's hidden war machine was about to reveal its most terrifying capability. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's children had spent 3 years dying to protect their secret. The Extinction Protocol activation began at dawn on the Imperial capital world of Nexus Prime. In the deepest vaults beneath the Crystal Spire, technicians initiated the startup sequence for weapons that could unravel the nuclear processes at the heart of stars. The plan was simple in its horror: destroy the Sol System sun, taking Earth and humanity's dimensional technology with it. Supreme Admiral HFY Cicera watched the preparation through quantum-encrypted channels, her 4 eyes reflecting the cold light of the stellar manipulation device. The Empire had used these weapons against the Vorthak Rebellion 2 millennia ago, turning their home star into a supernova that had ended their resistance permanently. Target lock achieved on Sol's nuclear core, reported the chief technician. Stellar destabilization cascade will begin in T-minus 30 minutes. But even as the countdown began, Admiral Chen was implementing humanity's final gambit. The Prometheus fleet hadn't been humanity's only secret. It had been a visible tip of a much larger revelation. The dimensional technology that allowed ships to hide in folded space had another application, one that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of warfare itself. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Chen activated a communication channel that reached across 17 star systems simultaneously. Her transmission bypassed all Imperial security protocols, speaking directly to every world, every species, every slave soldier and conquered population in the Zephyrian Empire. "People of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying across light years in real time. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chan of the Terran Federation. For 3 years, you watched my species die defending our homeworld. You were told we were defeated. That resistance was futile. You were lied to." The transmission continued as dimensional rifts began opening across the galaxy, not just near military targets, but above civilian populations, over enslaved worlds, in the heart of systems that had known only Imperial rule for generations. "We are not here for conquest," Chin continued. "We are here to offer you a choice. The Empire has ruled through fear, through the belief that their power was absolute. Today, we prove that belief wrong. The first liberation began on the Althurian homeworld. Elder Morthala watched in awe as human ships emerged from dimensional portals above her planet's major cities. But these weren't warships. They were medical vessels, cargo haulers, and construction ships. The humans had come not to conquer, but to build. Citizens of Althuria, came a new voice over the communication channel. "We offer you the technology to defend yourselves. We offer you the knowledge to hide from your oppressors. We offer you the chance to choose your own fate." The dimensional portals began disgorging not weapons, but fabrication units, shield generators, and most importantly, the technology to create pocket dimensions. The humans were sharing their greatest secret, giving every oppressed species the ability to disappear from the Empire's reach. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Across the galaxy, populations that had submitted to Imperial rule for centuries suddenly had an alternative. The Zarathi warrior clans activated ancient battle protocols, their honor-bound society erupting in righteous fury. The Valerian collective began disconnecting from their Imperial neural implants, their hive queens declaring independence for the first time in 1,000 years. But the most significant change came from the Empire's own military. The slave soldiers who had been forced to serve their conquerors found themselves equipped with human dimensional technology, able to disappear into folded space where Imperial mind control couldn't reach them. Entire fleets began defecting, their commanders realizing that the Empire's grip on power was no longer absolute. Supreme Admiral HFY watched her empire crumble in real time. The extinction protocol was ready to fire, but intelligence reports suggested that humanity had already evacuated most of Earth's population into dimensional refuges. Destroying Sol would be a Pyrrhic victory at best. "Ma'am," her aide reported, "we're receiving priority communications from across the Empire. 17 core worlds are reporting widespread rebellion. The Outer Rim territories have gone completely dark. And Admiral, the slave fleets are turning on their Imperial commanders." HFY closed her eyes. In less than 72 hours, humanity had accomplished what no species had managed in 3,000 years. They had broken the Empire's hold on the galaxy, not through superior firepower alone, but through the simple act of offering hope to the hopeless. "Cancel the extinction protocol," she ordered. "Signal all remaining loyal forces to fall back to the core worlds. We're going to defensive positions." But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. The Prometheus fleet had been positioning itself for one final demonstration of humanity's capabilities. As the Imperial forces began their retreat, human ships emerged from dimensional portals throughout the Nexus Prime system. The humans didn't attack the Imperial capital. Instead, they surrounded it, their void-touch weapons trained on the planet's surface. The message was clear. The Empire could continue to exist, but only at humanity's sufferance. Supreme Admiral HFY, Chen's voice came to the communication channel. "I offer you the same choice we've given every other species in the galaxy. Surrender your weapons of mass destruction, release your slave populations, and confine your empire to the worlds that serve you willingly. In return, we will allow you to maintain your government and your way of life." The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, HFY activated her response channel. "And if we refuse, then you'll discover what happens when you threaten the children of Earth a second time." The standoff lasted for 3 days. During that time, more species declared independence from the Empire. The Corvani Trade Federation offered to mediate peace negotiations. The Zarathi warrior clans proposed a military alliance with humanity. Even some Zephyrian colonies began questioning their loyalty to the Imperial core. In the end, it was the Empire's own people who made the decision. Faced with a choice between endless war against an enemy that could strike from dimensions they couldn't reach, or accepting limitations on their power, the Zephyrian High Command chose survival. The Treaty of Sol was signed 1 year later. The Empire was reduced to 7 core worlds, their weapons of mass destruction destroyed under human supervision. The liberated species formed the Galactic Defense Coalition, with humanity providing dimensional technology and strategic coordination. Admiral Chen retired to a small colony world, her duty complete, but she kept the Prometheus fleet in readiness, hidden in the spaces between spaces. Because while the galaxy had learned to live in peace, humanity had learned a darker lesson, that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become something your enemies fear to face. The Empire had rejoiced when Earth fell. They had never imagined that Earth's fall was simply the beginning of humanity's rise. The galaxy was a different place now, and it would never underestimate the children of Earth again. In the end, humanity had proven that the most dangerous enemy is not the one who fights you with superior weapons, but the one who makes you believe you've already won.